2 weeks ago.
I was concerned that just before we went to war with Iran, a whole group of FBI agents were terminated, about 10, who were reportedly analysts with expertise in handling Iranian counterterrorism, fluent in Farsi, long experienced. I know there's ongoing litigation, but have you replaced them? Was there a reason for their dismissal? Do we have the capabilities we need to protect the United States while there's an ongoing war in Iran? The public reporting as to the reasons for their dismissal I found deeply troubling.
Well, as I've addressed earlier, I don't believe the public reporting is accurate. What we did do for the first time in FBI history is stand up the Iran Threats Mission Center. That is housed inside the FBI with our Iran experts, including intelligence and analysts and agents. And we have seen a 47% increase in the arrest of Iranians.
Senator Coons.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Moran, Ranking Member Van Hollen, Senator Murkowski, and I appreciate each of our witnesses for being here today. During National Police Week, I just wanted to express my particular appreciation for the men and women of each of your agencies. When I was county executive, I was responsible for the second largest law enforcement agency in our state, and our partnerships with Marshals, ATF, DEA, FBI, and many other elements of federal law enforcement were really critical to our investigations and working to advance security in my home community. In just the last few months, the Newcastle County Police have worked with the FBI to arrest a suspect who had both plans and weapons to carry out a mass shooting at the University of Delaware. Worked with DEA to investigate methamphetamine distributors, worked with the Marshals Service to arrest a suspect with a warrant out for attempted murder. These are just a few brief examples. I have other topics to get to, but if each of you could just briefly tell me, what are your plans for strengthening your partnerships with local law enforcement, and what more do you need from Congress to execute on those plans? Director Patel.
Thank you, Senator. One thing we always need more of is data from state and local. Anything we can do from a legislative perspective at the federal state level to get us that data so we can ingest the data and get it back out to our partners, that's critical. What we're doing to expand specifically at the FBI, for the first time ever, we stood up our LEPIC, our Law Enforcement Partner Engagement Council. So I didn't want to just hear from police officers from around the country by email and phone call. I embedded 10 officers and sheriffs and tribal officers permanently at the FBI because they're the best connected. And so for us, that's the best way forward, along with getting out into the field and making sure our field partners see and feel us and touch us and tell us what their problems are.
Thank you, Director.
Senator, more connectivity to our state, local, and tribal partners is the utmost importance at DEA. Due with the significant change in the landscape with synthetic opioids, with more methamphetamine pills coming in, more cocaine coming in, it's important that those state and local counterparts, the men and women that are on the front lines every single day, have the same intelligence and the same information that the DEA does. Part of this is coming from our capacity to build foreign partnerships. The amount of foreign partnerships and people we have downrange in Mexico and Colombia, that intel is critical to the beat officer that's working in rural areas. So we have to continue to be better partners, continue to be more engaged, and respond when they call for help to address violent criminal activity.
Director Seralto, I'm going to interrupt myself. I appreciate the work that you and the Marshal Service do to keep federal judges safe, but there's thousands of state and local judges who don't have the same intelligence network, the same resources. I'm proud to co-sponsor a bill with Senator John Cornyn that would create a new state judicial threat intelligence and resource center. It would provide security assessments for local courts and help local law enforcement make assessments about how to keep judges' homes safe and how to keep court personnel safe. It's passed the Senate unanimously. Do you have any opinion about whether or not the House should take it up and whether or not partnering with state and local court systems would help advance judicial security in this country?
Senator, thank you. Thank you for your work on that. My opinion will be is that any judge that we can keep safe, whether it be in state or the federal bench, we should keep safe. To that end, I'll tell you, judges make decisions that are life-changing, sometimes to themselves. So 50% of the time, someone is upset with the judge's decision, right? Yep. Whether they win or lose. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. The justices, judges, the judiciary are the pillars of our country.
I look forward to working with you on protecting and promoting judicial security. Director Patel, Reauthorization of Section 702 is something I've previously grappled with, but we've not heard at all from officials from the FBI or the other intelligence agencies testifying about the proposed 18-month clean extension. Were you invited by Chairman Grassley to testify before our committee about Section 702?
What I recall, Senator, is that we in the FBI team have been providing briefings pursuant to the chairman's request. So we've done at least a dozen in the Senate and at least half a dozen or more in the House, including myself and Director Ratcliffe personally.
Okay. I have not participated in or benefited from any of those briefings. And doing oversight on the reforms that were put in place and how closely they're being followed is critical to my concluding whether or not I'll vote for an extension. Director, I have to ask you one last question. You attended the Olympics in Milan. How much did your trip cost, and to what extent did that help you carry out your mission as director of the FBI?
I greatly appreciate the question, Senator. As you know, the FBI and DHS are responsible for the security of the Olympics, the World Cup, the F1, the Super Bowl, and everything else. We had 250,000 Americans travel to Milan. We're proud that we stood up our jock there and had 0 major security incidents involving American citizens. And what we did was we purposely planned that trip around the Olympics because, as I mentioned in my opening, the top cyber criminal from the CCP was housed in Italian custody. While there, we were able to work an agreement, an arrangement to have that individual expelled from Italy instead of going back to China, like has so often happened in places like Serbia. Mm-hmm. And so we accomplished that mission, and we kept it quiet, and that individual was returned to America 2 weeks ago.
I was concerned that just before we went to war with Iran, a whole group of FBI agents were terminated, about 10, who were reportedly analysts with expertise in handling Iranian counterterrorism, fluent in Farsi, long experienced. I know there's ongoing litigation, but have you replaced them? Was there a reason for their dismissal? Do we have the capabilities we need to protect the United States while there's an ongoing war in Iran? The public reporting as to the reasons for their dismissal I found deeply troubling.
Well, as I've addressed earlier, I don't believe the public reporting is accurate. What we did do for the first time in FBI history is stand up the Iran Threats Mission Center that is housed inside the FBI with our Iran experts, including intelligence and analysts and agents, and we have seen a 47% increase in the arrest of Iranian spies.
Do you disagree that there were 10 Iran specialists dismissed right before the war began?
Yes.
Senator Hagerty.
All right, everyone, grab your notes and brace yourselves, because what we are breaking down today is an absolute masterclass in congressional oversight, bureaucratic re-engineering, and deep state friction. This is May 2026, and we are sitting inside a high-stakes Senate hearing where Senator Chris Coons is going toe-to-toe with the highly controversial, newly minted FBI Director, Kash Patel, alongside leaders from the DEA and the U.S. Marshals Service. This isn't your typical post-police week come Bayer. While it starts with routine platitudes about local law enforcement partnerships, it rapidly devolves into a fierce interrogation covering state judicial assassination threats, backroom FISA 702 briefings, an international cyber bounty hunt disguised as an Olympic vacation, and a terrifying allegation that the FBI purged its own top Iran analysts right before the missiles started flying in the Middle East. Let's do our first educational deep dive here into the federal local data pipeline. Coons opens by highlighting real-world successes in Delaware, showing how local police teamed up with the FBI to halt a mass shooting plot at the University of Delaware, worked with the DEA on meth rings, and utilized the marshals to hunt down attempted murder suspects. He asks what these agencies need to scale these wins. Look at Kash Patel's answer. He demands data encapsulation. Patel is pushing for federal legislation to force state and local agencies to feed their raw intelligence upward into a centralized federal matrix, which the FBI can ingest and redistribute. To bypass traditional red tape, Patel brags about standing up the Law Enforcement Partner Engagement Council, LEP, permanently embedding 10 local sheriffs and tribal officers directly inside the FBI building. The DEA representative echoes this, noting that with the skyrocketing influx of synthetic fentanyl, methamphetamine pills, and cartel networks, local beat cops in rural America desperately need access to the Tier 1 intelligence gathered downrange by DEA operators in Mexico and Colombia. But watch how fast Coons pivots the conversation at the 2-minute mark. He interrupts his own flow to address Director Seralto of the U.S. Marshals regarding judicial security. Coons is sounding the alarm on a massive vulnerability in our legal system. While the Marshals do an incredible job shielding federal judges, thousands of state, county, and local municipal judges are completely unprotected, sitting like ducks in a highly polarized legal environment. Coons highlights a bill he co-sponsored with Republican Senator John Cornyn to establish a state judicial threat intelligence and resource center. Seralto drops a sobering statistic to justify it. 50% of the time, someone leaves a courtroom furious at a judge's decision. In a world where judges' home addresses are leaked online routinely, protecting the judiciary isn't about politics. It's about preserving the basic pillars of the republic. Coons uses this to shame the House of Representatives for sitting on a bill that passed the Senate unanimously. Now, let's get to the real friction of the video, because this is where the kid gloves come off. Coons shifts his sights directly onto Kash Patel regarding the Section 702 FISA reauthorization. For context, Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act allows the government to conduct warrantless surveillance on foreign targets outside the U.S., but it has historically swept up the private communications of millions of American citizens. The administration is pushing a highly controversial 18-month clean extension of these powers. Coons calls Patel out, stating that rank-and-file senators haven't heard a peep on Capitol Hill from the FBI testifying publicly about this extension. Patel's response is highly defensive. He claims they've done at least a dozen private briefings in the Senate and half a dozen in the House, noting that he and Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe have personally led them. But Coons fires back with a cold, hard truth. I have not participated in or benefited from any of those briefings. This exposes a massive procedural rift. The FBI is allegedly micro-targeting specific friendly lawmakers with private briefings while keeping critics like Coons completely in the dark on how oversight reforms are being implemented. Coons makes it clear, no transparency on the abuse of Americans' data means no vote for reauthorization. If you thought the FISA debate was tense, look at how Coons tries to set a trap regarding Patel's recent trip to the Winter Olympics in Milan. Coons asks point blank, how much did your trip cost, and how did it help your mission? This is a classic political setup designed to paint a controversial director as a jet-setting bureaucrat burning taxpayer money on an Italian vacation. But Patel handles the counterpunch beautifully, exposing a massive, highly sensitive counterintelligence operation that had been kept entirely under wraps until this moment. Patel reveals that while the FBI and DHS were managing security for the 250,000 Americans traveling to Milan, they purposefully utilized the trip as a tactical smokescreen. The top cybercriminal belonging to the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, was sitting in Italian custody. Historically, countries like Serbia or China-aligned nations intercept these assets and extradite them back to Beijing where they disappear. Patel reveals that because he was on the ground personally, the FBI hammered out a high-stakes deal with the Italian government to expel the individual directly to the United States. Patel drops the ultimate flex, that CCP asset was landed on American soil just 2 weeks ago. It is a stunning reveal that transforms an alleged vacation scandal into a major geopolitical victory against Beijing. But then, we reach the absolute climax of this 15-minute breakdown, the moment that is going to blow up the algorithms. Coons corners Patel on the Wartime Intelligence Purge. Coons drops a bombshell allegation. He states that right before the United States went to war with Iran, a group of 10 senior, highly experienced FBI analysts and counterterrorism experts were abruptly terminated. These weren't low-level staffers. These were seasoned analysts fluent in Farsi with decades of institutional knowledge on Iranian networks. Coons notes there is ongoing whistleblower litigation, but demands to know, why were they fired on the eve of an active war? How can the FBI protect the homeland from Iranian cyber attacks and sleeper cells when the director just fired the only people who speak the language? Coons calls the public reports of this political purge deeply troubling. Watch Patel's face. This is where the room temperature drops below freezing. Patel outright rejects the public reporting as totally inaccurate. He counters by announcing that, for the first time in FBI history, he has consolidated the agency's resources to stand up a permanent Iran Threats Mission Center. Instead of scattered analysts, He claims to have localized all Farsi experts, intelligence assets, and field agents into a single wartime nerve center. His proof of success: a staggering 47% increase in the arrest of Iranian spies on American soil since the war began. But Coons refuses to back down, pressing the issue one last time. Do you disagree that there were 10 Iran specialists dismissed right before the war began? Patel's definitive answer is cut off by the gavel as the hearing moves to Senator Haggerty, leaving the audience with a chilling cliffhanger. This transcript gives us the ultimate blueprint of the deep-seated distrust defining the 2026 intelligence apparatus. On one side, you have institutionalists like Coons who are genuinely terrified that a highly politicized FBI leadership is firing veteran specialists, abusing warrantless wiretaps, and operating in the shadows. On the other side, you have Kash Patel's aggressive, disruptive doctrine, centralizing data, bypassing traditional legislative channels, executing stealth operations overseas, and claiming that his numbers speak for themselves. As you look at this footage, you have to ask yourself who you trust. If Patel is right, his aggressive shaking of the bureaucratic tree is netting real results, catching Chinese cyberlords and locking up 47% more Iranian spies. But if Coons' warnings are valid, the administration is fighting a major foreign war after blinding its own intelligence agencies, leaving the American homeland exposed to the next major asymmetric threat. This is the raw reality of the 2026 Department of Justice. The old rules of cooperation are completely dead, the stakes are existential, and the war isn't just happening across the ocean, it's happening right inside the walls of the J. Edgar Hoover building. Keep your eyes on that whistleblower lawsuit regarding those 10 Farsi analysts, because the truth behind that purge will determine whether our intelligence agencies are actually protecting the country or just protecting the narrative.